Elena, it's so nice to see you again. I was just
Oh,
saying about
nice.
the wonderful work you've been doing lately. You're so dedicated.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's passion, passion for truth, for disclosure, and for humanity. It's so exciting. I don't see the tiredness, honestly. I barely sleep and it's exciting, but you know that as one of the greatest minds of our times, you know what is this passion is.
Well, thank you. And in fact, you're aware that we chose today's conversation around Thoth and the meaning of the nine and the science of the cedar races and the sort of science lesson behind all of that. But to start that lesson, I thought actually to talk about you for a moment.
Okay. Cool.
Well, it's specifically in terms of what I see as your bravery.
Oh, thank you.
Uh, yeah.
Wow.
Well, Elena has been hanging in there, guys, as half the planet decides they're not ready for this. And Elena's like out front there saying, hey, it's real. I've been there. Believe it or not, this is my reality. And look, people have come behind Elena, Alex Collier, and boy, did we have fun recently with Jean-Charles Moyen and Michael Salla. So there's consensus here, guys. So look, take Elena seriously. And that's a bravery I wanted to acknowledge here as we begin this.
Wow.
And real bravery. And actually, I prepared just a thought about that, if I may, Elena.
Wow, thank you. I'm just blushing. You're gonna make me cry. So,
No, that's a courage. That is a courage. Her reality has been affirmed now, and people need to take into account it's just not possible to sweep this under the rug anymore. Anyway, so part of this conversation, I thought today, obviously for me, it's a science lesson. And the science lesson has to do with the fact that there are some times when we need to actually have our own discrimination about things. We have to look at things as they are and have discrimination and see whether or not this makes sense from our own knowledge of pure principle. And that's basically why I prepared today's lecture about Thoth, Hermes, and the cedar races. Basically, today's lesson is supposed to be like, if you were an engineer and you wanted to try out for a job being an engineer for the cedar races and Thoth, what would your training be?
oh, I look forward to that. Oh, wow.
So that's the prepared lecture. And in that regard, so that then enables us hopefully to have some kind of discrimination. Even, for example, Elena, if we may say gently, was one of the first to say that the Swaru people had kind of lost the plot and in fact fallen into an AI trap, actually. And there was a critical moment there when they said Swaru number X had actually, well, the earlier one died, and so they resynthesized her from her shipboard computer. Hello? Is there something wrong with this? Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Totally obvious.
yeah, like, oops, this is the AI problem. Hello.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
why does not your shipboard computer have a soul? That's the question.
Yes, because it is artificial intelligence, and I can testify to have witnessed that. So yeah, that's
Yes.
it.
And so today we're going to look at that question electrically. Of course, what we mean by having a soul, enough implosion in the aura to radiate coherently in what's called the Kesjan or the Ba from the Cow, which is a longitudinal array predicted by ability to lucid dream. So this is a coherence, which we had so much fun with Jean-Charles Moyen.
I
Thanks
know.
to you, actually. That was so great. So just a 2-minute review of that story. So thanks to Elena, Jean-Charles, basically, remember, Jean-Charles is one of the main people that correlates what Elena is saying, guys, down to the details. Ain't that cool?
Yes, yes, it was quite surprising, and it was like recorded. That moment was
Yeah,
recorded during an interview.
spontaneously. They were on the
And
same ship.
I can't. I think
It was great.
you can't fake tears of
Yeah,
emotion. It's like,
it
what?
was so real. And so anyway, so then Jean-Charles basically calls us up and said, look, my lucid dreams are regularly turning into Stargate portals, and we need to prove that to the scientists. How are we going to measure this? And we gave Jean-Charles some actually difficult homework, which was, okay, Jean-Charles, we need to measure. You're going to have to measure your brain waves and your breath and your heart rate variability. It's all at flameinmind.com. And he did it. He got the toys, the brainwave sensor. It's a simple, looks like sunglasses, and measured his brainwaves. And basically, his brainwaves were off the chart coherent. A caduceus, hint Hermes, cascade in his brainwaves. There's so much so that our programmer, Patrick, was speechless for 2 days after he saw it. And so we knew exactly why Jean-Charles' lucid dreams turned into Stargate portals. Electrically, there's no other conclusion. He was massively implosive, centripetal. And so his aura became so centripetal, he could project the amount of inertia into the longitudinal array, which is introduction to the physics of stargates. And you and I have been there in that conversation.
Yes.
So anywho, this is an example of, a correlation of what ELENA has been saying. But the other example I wanted to use was, so just in terms of today's news, Michael Salla just announced, and he's a good friend for ELENA, and we all love the guy. So he's saying, well, a number of people have asked me about Corey Goode's latest update, Andromeda Syndicate, and he's going into all these stories in the space program. And basically, Corey Goode has come up with all kinds of, and so Michael Salla at the bottom, he says, I find no corroborating evidence for Michael Salla's claims of an Andromeda Syndicate, a race called Hugh, Andromeda Gal, Zulu Planet, the whole story, that basically Corey Goode lost the plot. And somebody's got to be out there just saying, hello. Well, I want to say I was there the day, I was with Yurka the day we laid out the lab that became Gaia TV. And when Gaia TV originally sponsored Corey Goode, it was because of Jay Widener, who was my partner at Gaia TV, actually. And now Jay Widener has spent the last year dealing with the lawsuit with Corey Goode and Gaia TV. Like, oops, if they'd had some discrimination, they would have found out when Corey Goode lost the plot, actually. And Gaia TV, unfortunately, is in a similar situation with Gosha and the Swaru story. Somebody needs to have the kind of discrimination to say, when does this fit together and when does it not? And that's where, if we had the science lesson, we can make our own decisions intelligently. And one of the reasons we prepared the science lesson today. So the discrimination essentially has to do with, when does a race develop a soul? That's one way of talking about it, which is, in my view, the essence of what is the Cedar races, Thoth and the Nine, what they're here for, and why their symbol is the caduceus. That's that's the story, the story to the Mori of what I prepared for today. And there's a slideshow.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm going to take note because I already have stuff to say about it. So I'm going to just.
But ELENA, I thought we should do one more thing before I go into my song and dance, if you don't mind. And that is, you have a new book coming out, right?
Yes. It's all written and it's at the proofreading at the moment. And I'm just working on the illustration now, waiting for the proofreading to come back. So I do not know when it will be published, but it is soon anyway. And this book is, I think it's my masterpiece. It's why I came here. It's why I was in Canada.
I got the feeling, I can't wait. So can you tell us the title?
The Cedars.
The Cedars. Well, hello. That's the story of our day anyways. What a coincidence.
This is the accomplishment of my mission. And
great.
The dark ones know it, and they try in any way possible to take me down before I manage the task. But the thing is, they already failed because the manuscript is in the hand of different people who, if anything happens to me, will publish it.
She's a brave lady. Look out for this one. I'm going to declare you an honorary Scorpio, if you don't mind.
You can kill the messenger. You won't kill the message.
It's good. And guys, honestly, I did not know that was the title of ELENA's new book, the cedars before I prepared today's lecture about the cedars. What a coincidence. So yes, so there I was in electrical engineering class 101, and I decided I wanted to be Hermes. I mean, I wanted to be Thoth, and somebody better prepare me. You know, my electrical engineering classes happened at University of Detroit, and normally, if I went to my classmates in electrical engineering school and said, "Well, Thoth said they came back because we need to be higher consciousness, and we need to be the next density, and we need to be in the next dimension," my classmates in that electrical engineering class would tell me, "You're nuts, go away." So we need to turn that. That's that's not a bad answer. Next dimension, higher density. It's actually a correct answer. It is. It's literally correct. It's spin density, and it is propagating into a larger array, which is the next axis of spin symmetry superposed. It's the right answer. The problem was no one has explained it yet to my electrical engineering class. Oops.
But you're going to do it.
Well, I'm setting myself the challenge anyway. What else is fun?
Well, you've got to have fun. If it's not fun, why bother?
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
Science is so fun. Go on.
So then, when ELENA asked me what I thought I would like to talk about today, what I told her, quote, "Pyramid history of Hermes / Thoth and the Cedar race is the 9, key to the physics of soul versus the AI Borg challenge." This was our stated mission. So now we have a title. Do we have the material? Well, in order to really understand what it meant to be a cedar race and how you would train for the job, I mean, I would suspect probably that's a well-paying job. So I think it's probably worth training for.
You've got a job upstairs after this one. So that's for sure.
So guys, let's train for the job. We want to be a cedar race when we grow up. So how does the engineer get trained? Well, that's the story to today's Maury. So anywho, where I was going to prepare to start that story was, you know, if you ask most anybody, any historian who built the pyramids, most anyone will say, well, basically Hermes. You know, there seems to be no coincidence. And when we read the book Only Planet of Choice, and the 9 are saying who's leading, who's the messenger here, at the cover it says, well, it was Thoth, Hermes. So, you know, what did it take? Well, here's a better way to put the question. If you understood what the designer of the pyramid was doing electrically, you'd probably have a very good clue of what it was to be Thoth, Hermes, and one of the cedar races. And that's where I was going to start the conversation, the actual physics of. Now, recently we did a wonderful film on our YouTube channel, Dan Winter Fractal Field, which is about 1/3 the subscribers of ELENA's channel, by the way. But we share it always, and it's all fun.
And I encourage all my subscribers to go and subscribe to Dan Winter's channel. The link is at the bottom of this video, because amazing stuff. It will blow your mind. Really activating stuff.
Thank you. And it serves that, you know, my more scientific side of people meets the more, you know, deep spiritual, intuitively inspired interstellar contact people of ELENA. So these two schools need to meet. It's a good thing. Anywho, so our question on the table is, do we understand electrically what Thoth was up to, Hermes, designing the pyramid most specifically? And we dealt with that at length with Sam Osmanagich on that recent film on our channel. It's called The Purpose of the Pyramids. And here's a 5-minute review. Mainly, the pyramids were a global wireless power grid, literally. And I am the electrical engineer who's here to explain what that is to you, actually. That the pyramids were a high piezo and high dielectric material, more piezo at the top, and the material is high dielectric, which high dielectric means just distributes capacitive charge efficiently, basically. In other words, if you're in a building of high dielectric, like natural material, your aura can breathe through it. if you're in a building of low dielectric material like steel or aluminum, your aura can't breathe through it and you're frozen. Sorry, bad news. So the high dielectric and high piezo material of the pyramid meant that in a correct geometry, it was, quote, the Hummer. Now, if you read the book 2/3 by David Myers and David Percy, and I have a website about that, goldenmean.info/Babylon. They basically claim to be Arcturian inspiration. I think they were, as was my friend Jose Argoyas, Arcturian inspirations in part, and we know they're an advanced culture, actually. And the pyramid was called the Hummer because it hummed. What did that mean? Well, actually, remember when everybody said it's so important that the angle at the base of the pyramid is 51 degrees, 51 minutes. And that created a geometry such that the height to base ratio created golden mean ratio. Oh, well, but why electrically? Well, because that created golden mean ratio frequencies. Okay, but why electrically? Now, here's where we get to the film we just made with Sam, because Patrick, our programmer, and Valerie, my partner, they went to Sam's Bosnian pyramid, actually several times, and they measured the harmonics inside. And so the frequencies of the hum, remember, this was just after Sam is reporting repeatedly that literally millions of people are coming from around the world to his pyramid because they're getting rejuvenation. Like they're getting younger. This is called negentropy, by the way, which just happens to be the title of my book. I just happen to have my book handy. Fractalfield.com, Origin of Negentropy. And so the pyramid is negentropy, which means rejuvenation, which gets people younger. Now, we happen to study that, and then we use those frequencies, and we produced a plasma that makes people younger. And Sam actually bought one of those systems called Therify.net, which is doing rejuvenation commercially successfully in 25 countries, actually, which is a frequency signature produces rejuvenation. And that frequency signature looks caduceus. Hello, Hermes. and that's the story to our more. That's where we're going with this. And so now we begin the slideshow, hopefully. Am I brave enough here? Share screen. Let's see if I can do this right. Sorry. Now I go back. Here we go. You can see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see your screen. It's perfect.
Actually, my optical fiber is fine, but the plug on the back of the computer was loose. Oops.
That's why, yes, that's why. So it will work better, hopefully.
Okay. So anywho, this is the frequency signature. On top, here we're measuring. The website is called flameinmind.com, and the section there is called Life Force. And if you can see, this is the frequencies shown in white that we measured in the Visico pyramid, Bosnian pyramid on the right, of the harmonics inside the pyramid. These are the low frequencies under 60 hertz. You see the dominant harmonic here, 53 hertz, actually, dominant harmonic. And then we have some harmonics around the Schumann series down below, which also includes a 30 hertz component. And we have a 32 hertz component here, which is, by the way, a Schumann frequency. So anyway, we measured 53 hertz repeatedly. We measured this 53 hertz all around the world, actually, as part of a Schumann cascade. Now, if you look down here, you see here the documented Schumann harmonics. Well known, this is classic physics literature about the Schumann harmonics, that not only 7.83 base, but it's a harmonic series, 14, 21, 26, 33, 39. And here's another peak here, which would be about 53 hertz. Now, so we're studying that pyramid, and then we figured out why the 53 hertz was there when the actual origin of negentropy, the reason anything is negentropic, and the reason anything makes gravity, and the reason anything makes bliss or consciousness, is when the frequency series fit this. It's called origin of negentropy equation. It's my original equation. I took Planck length and time, which is the musical key signature of everything in physics, and multiplied by powers, exponents of golden mean ratio. And when you do simply that, you get a caduceus.
Oh, yes.
named for Hermes, which is called phase conjugate fractality, or a caduceus.
Dan, just if I may, for my normies audience, could you quickly define negentropy, please?
Yes, sorry. So entropy means tending toward disorder. Very simple. And your science teacher incorrectly informed your child that the universe is tending toward entropy, disorder, like the universe is going to fall apart. Oh dear. And this is what your science teacher is telling your kids. And guess what? They're wrong. No, there is a way out of entropy toward negentropy, which means tending toward self-organization, self-organizing. And it's the title of my book for a very specific reason, because when you take a frequency series in this cascade, you get the geometry of what's called implosion. And when the charge implodes right down to that, again, that Planck length threshold, 1.61 times 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, at that point, the inertia is converted from transverse to longitudinal. It's called longitudinal EMF, incorrectly called scalar rotational. And that longitudinal array is A, the physics of gravity waves, the only physics of gravity waves. B, the only way you lucid dream and take memory through death, that array. It is the physics of the collective unconscious, the communion of saints, and the Akashic records. It's a longitudinally coherent array, which inhabits the nodes of sacred space, which looks like this. So the still points in that array bounce in and out, and that longitudinal component, which is simply longitudinal, just means instead of propagating up and down, the transverse EMF, which is all our radio, the inertia propagates like a compressional wave, like a sound wave, called longitudinal coherent. And when you propagate in that way, you can go through the speed of light and you get immortal. I mean, you have the Ba from the Ka. I mean, you have the Keshan body. I mean, you have the rainbow light body. I mean, you have the Vril. So the ability to get longitudinal is literally get longitudinal or get dead, which is a subscript of the bumper sticker that says get fractal or get dead. But anywho, the ability to do that depends on a frequency signature. And that frequency signature is the equation here. And I'm going to show you that equation in the science lesson. But basically, you take Planck and keep multiplying by golden mean ratio, and you get a frequency series. And that is the perfect caduceus. And I did that, and I made implosion in water, theimploder.com. It's used around the world. Then I did that, and I did it in brainwaves, flameinmind.com, and we make bliss with brainwaves around the world. And we have the world's most powerful bliss-inducing binaural sound, very cheap, flame and silent, with the same equation. And then I used that frequency signature in plasma, completing what Priory started, and then I invented Therify.net in plasma, and we're doing commercial rejuvenation in 25 countries. And it's all only that frequency signature. Pure implosion, named after Hermes Thoth, the subject of today's talk. So the frequencies of that equation in top on blue here, 2.78, 4.5, 7.29, 11.8, 19.9, those are in blue. The calculated pure implosion frequencies, which, by the way, would land you correctly on 50 hertz, which would enable you to make carbon nano. And 60 hertz, bad news. 50 hertz is the most healing frequency in all the cancer literature because it's bang on the equation for negentropy. Anywho, on the bottom in green are the known Schumann harmonics, 3 hertz, 7.83, 14.3, and 20.8. Now, why am I explaining this? Because Thoth Hermes is the guy who not only designed the pyramids, but he's the guy that designed the Earth to resonate at the frequencies we call Schumann. Hello, because the cavity between the Earth and the ionosphere is a bounce array, and the ringing of that bounce array is what determines the Schumann resonance. So who designed the Schumann harmonic series to be almost perfect for making life? I mean, if that isn't the job of a cedar race, Thoth Hermes, the 9, that's the life designer in essence, is the guy who figured out how to make Earth the right size. I mean, yes, Venus is golden ratio planet of Earth, and Moon fits it. There's so many. In fact, if you look at spirosolaris.ca, the most dominant ratio in all orbital mechanics is golden mean ratio. Not just because that's the only way to make stable gravity, but it's the only way to make negentropy, and the only way to make life, and the only way to make consciousness.
Yes, yes, and that comes into the terraforming process.
Exactly.
When you need not only to create a rock in space, that's not the point. Well, that's the first stage, but then you need to create a viable environment, which is electromagnetic toroidal biosphere, and also an etheric resonant plane that so consciousness will be able to anchor. If there isn't this
Yes.
layer, consciousness cannot anchor. Do you agree?
And the very definition of anchoring, which is the French word for grounding,
yes,
actually, that only definition, grounding means access to fractality for electric engineers and psychologists, because it's access to charge distribution efficiency, actually. And the only charge distribution efficiency possible here actually is at the pine cone tip of that caduceus, where the Planck enables the transverse to be distributed through the speed of light into longitudinal array at golden mean ratio multiples times the speed of light, which Professor Raymond Chow proved, which is the smoking gun proof of my theory, after Tom Bearden proved that a gravity wave is longitudinal.
Yes,
so
which
anyway,
is very interesting. Go on.
No, but so to get tuned to that Planck length, so to propagate through the center of the pine cone accurately, tuning your ringing bell to implode at Planck, and we'll see the Grail animation in a minute. So you had to get very close to that frequency cascade. Well, Thoth Hermes, when he designed the Schumann harmonics, which became that Schumann cascade, is what rings the bell of the pyramid to implode and propagate longitudinally, and that longitudinal array is called global wireless power distribution. And so at those nodes, you could pick up the global wireless power. And Tesla failed because he didn't get the locations right and he didn't get the frequencies right. But now we know what that is. And that's all at fractalfield.com/vacuum energy. But just to finish the thought here, so you see why we measured 53 hertz instead of 50. 50 is the exact golden ratio of Planck. 53 is what we measured all over the place. Well, if you take 7.29 theoretical, which is theoretical implosion perfect, and 7.83, which is the actual prime harmonic of Schumann, that ratio is exactly the ratio between 50 and 53 hertz. Hello? So the 53 hertz we're measuring, and when we got the proof of that, so Sam and I got together recently. He says, yeah, we're scratching our heads because we went to the top of our pyramid and other pyramids, and we kept getting 28 kilohertz, 28,000 hertz. We measured it all at the top. Every time we get 28 kilohertz. And guess what? If you multiply golden ratio times Planck, the theoretical accurate would be 26,033. But if you take the ratio between 7.29 and 7.83 and apply that, the actual measured frequency is 27,961 hertz right here. So now we got three main harmonics: the Schumann actual harmonics, the 53 hertz, the 28 kilohertz. We know exactly why we measured those frequencies in the pyramid, because the pyramid had to implode through Planck, and the Schumann resonance is slightly displaced from pure implosion negentropy. So when you see, now you can look at what causes the Schumann harmonics to exist here. Here it is. So this is the cavity between the Earth and the ionosphere rings like a bell. And these are the actual Schumann harmonics: 7.8, 14, 20, and 33. We had 32 before. And here's our measurement of a happy tree. You can predict in advance. This is the same device, flameinmind.com, measures life force in pyramids and life force in trees, and the same device measures your brainwaves when you have in bliss, because the frequencies you need are the same in every case.
Fractals, it's all the same. It's all resonating. It's working the same. It's the equation of the universe. I mean,
that's right. You make implosion. It's equation of Thoth. It's called caduceus. Yeah. So the point is that if you were a life designer, you would need to understand how to build planets whose diameter and radii could ring at the appropriate cascade. Remember when that? I'm going to stop my screen share here. But didn't we have the conversation once, ELENA, about supposedly when the Federation had to make the frequency generators inside the moon to create a temporary quarantine here? The hollow metal moon from the Federation, where we did our galactic history that time. And that the moon was designed to make a series of frequencies, which in that case increase the amplitude of the Van Allen belt, which temporarily trapped the bad guys here. That was the short summary of that. But again, they were tuning the frequency cascade of the whole planet, just like the life designers and Thoth Hermes would do. And the reason is because that is the job. So now when we step back and now there's a slideshow about the science here, and we step back and say, well, the Venus orbit is perfectly golden ratio times the Earth orbit. Ooh, what?
Yeah,
and,
weird.
and what is a life designer doing? How are we going to train for the job of being a seeder, a life designer, if we don't understand the pure principle? Oops.
Yes, and I can recall that Alex Collier told that I think it was a Patal or the Andromedans, I think it was a Patal, they moved the planets around in our star system. So that makes sense.
Yeah. It's about designing systems which are negentropic, implosive, and make life. So a life designer has to know the cause of life.
Yes.
And the cause of life is the same as the cause of all negentropy, which is actually the same as the cause of consciousness and the cause of gravity. Now, sadly, on this planet, because your science teacher does not know why anything is centripetal, that same science teacher does not know why an object falls to the ground, or why anything is conscious, or why anything is negentropic. And this is a disaster. I am here representing Thoth to tell you, we got to figure that out quick, or we're in big trouble. and that takes me to my final slideshow, which is the science lesson. And so that is a keynote. Wait, no, share screen. Here we go. Let's see if I can do my homework. It's called Cause of Gravity. But I slightly edited the slideshow. Yes. So here is New Scientist magazine saying the universe is fractal. And here's Nature magazine saying the arrangement of masses in the universe is dodeca. Are you seeing my slide, Elena?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
So this is, somebody set up the geometry of the masses in the universe to be dodecahedral. Hint, golden ratio everywhere. And somebody arranged the masses of the universe to be fractal. Hello, who designed it? Question mark. Well, obviously, this is the only way you can make gravity stable once you know why objects fall to the ground. And this is the only way you can design for life. And so we want to understand those principles. And that's why we're going to be talking about this caduceus, this implosion, why golden ratio creates this self-organizing system. That's what this little slideshow is about. This is the short science lesson, which hopefully I promise isn't going to be too, it's going to be so much fun to pretend it's not even really science. Just pretend it's fun.
Yes, science must be fun, and science is fun anyway.
Exactly. So I retitled this lecture, The Hermetic Caduceus, in honor of Hermes Thoth. So the centripetal fractal electric cause of gravity, the required key, the key to the seeder races, the life force in a seed. What makes a seed alive? A seed is alive when it's electrically centripetal enough to really suck. It can suck in the first nutrient if it's implosive.
Yes.
That's why if you zap a seed to become centripetal capacitively, and after hundreds of academics studied pyramids and figured out they didn't build them for burials, they built them for zapping their seeds. And now we found out Therify.net, which is the same thing. We're getting 200 to 400% growth effect by zapping the seeds. It's implosive, and that's what the imploder does. And so that's the key to 0 point energy. And the point is the same electric field that makes a seed alive is what enables bliss, basically. So this is some of the websites people know: goldenmean.info, fractalfield.com, flameinmind.com, the imploder, Therify.net. That's our, this is our public relations. And now this lecture, part of this lecture was originally prepared for the Breakthrough Energy Movement 0 Point Energy Conference in Amsterdam. This is our YouTube. Dan Winter, Fractal Field is our YouTube. Okay, so if you know what is a plasma vortex, how it becomes centripetal, hint, a caduceus, literally conjugating gravity, then you can know what is the physics of implosion. If you were Hermes, you can know how a shaman steers tornadoes. You can know how plasma creates healing, Therify.net. You could know what an elemental or an angel is, implosive plasma. when you see a ghost, why is the temperature? You measure the presence of a ghost if it gets cold. That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Why does the plasma of a ghost create coldness?
Cold, especially in the spine.
Exactly. Thank you. And the point is that when a water vortex is implosive, like Schauberger's is piezo, it spontaneously gets colder just before it starts creating electricity from gravity, actually. And also the plasma vortex therify.net. The tip will occasionally spontaneously get colder. That's called negentropy.
That's it. Oh, I have something. Oh yeah, I'm taking note for later. Don't want to break your
It's
speech.
okay. You know, I carry on and get too enthused. So your questions are probably making more fun anyway. So either way, and so you know what an elemental or an angel is. These are living plasma bodies that are implosively centripetal, and then you can see what releases a ghost, like Therify or a healing aura, because the ghost is plasma that doesn't have enough coherence enough to get centripetal to be distributed. Whereas Jean-Charles Moyen, he got that frequency signature in his brain waves, and his aura gets very dense at the center. And that implosion is literally what a stargate or portal is that propagation of that longitudinal array. So then you begin to understand out-of-body visions, lucid dreaming, because that longitudinal interferometry is the only physics of action at a distance, the key to all spiritual science, actually. And how action at a distance stargates work, how hydrogen makes gravity. You take that same equation, you get the radii of hydrogen. That was my discovery. I was the first to prove Planck times golden ratio is the 3 radii of hydrogen. So I was the first to prove how hydrogen is fractal, and therefore how and why hydrogen makes gravity, because it is a fractal. So then you can figure out how Gaia, Earth's Schumann field, became negentropic, what we were just discussing. We can decide, learn how a soul forms in imploding DNA. That really is the point of today's conversation. At the end of the conversation, we could know that DNA, when it recursively braid implodes in the presence of the phonon signature of human bliss, that becomes very centripetal and it spits out longitudinal coherence, predicting lucid dreaming, called a soul. And knowing that is the moment when we're not susceptible to the AI propaganda.
Yes.
Because we know the difference. We could just give a friendly, loving example. Dan Willis working with Marcel Vogel, who's, I love Marcel too. And there's an interesting lesson there. The actual helical array of Marcel's quartz crystals is pure hexagonal. And so the piezoelectric electricity in that quartz, right, is actually the top-down view is a hex of the SiO2 silicon dioxide helix called quartz. And this top-down view of the ratchet of that helix, the SiO2 forms tetracubically. So top-down view is a hex like a cube. And piezoelectric means that the pressure on the sides will create a voltage on the ends. That's called piezoelectric, which is connecting a long wave to a short wave. Very magical, very useful. But the geometry of that hex means that it's not going to spit out a longitudinal by itself. But here's the fun part. There's a but. So the very nature of a hexagonal helix piezoelectric, opposite of the pent piezo helix called DNA, is that it can't have a soul because it's hex. However, and I was there with Marcel Vogel the day we were, Cleve Baxter's polygraph. Marcel's got one of those in his hand, and he's pumping the leaf on this plant, and the polygraph shows that the plant is responding to him. And from the quartz crystal, and Marcel is sweating up a storm. He's doing a lot of work. And you know why? Because the pump wave in that quartz crystal was his body's infrasound, called a phase conjugate pump wave, which is the same caduceus we just saw, the brainwave heart harmonics of bliss. So the body can make the phase conjugate pump wave that turns a hex crystal into something that will make a longitudinal propagation, heal the plant. But without the human body, it ain't going to make any longitudinal. So in other words, it requires you to be there having some bliss to bless it, or it's not going to be implosive.
Yeah,
That's the lesson.
you need to give the impulse.
Impulse is the right word. It's actually the
Impulse
correct
as the
word.
right word. I
Yeah.
recommend everyone to watch the video I made with Dan Willis on the
Yes.
crystals. I put the link down. Which is very interesting was the vortex point. What you know,
Yes.
because we were in contact with Jen Han, who is a terraformer from the Pleiades, and he was explaining to us the vortex point, the singularity in the crystal that we need, where we need to send the impulse, and that is done with consciousness. We can
Exactly.
either breathe the consciousness in, as the shamans do, or either send quick electrical pulses at where the vortex is. It's yeah, you have so many comments on this, I suppose.
It's beautiful, and that is precisely correct. And if I'm an electrical engineer needing to understand that, at the vortex point is the only place where the transverse becomes longitudinal, where it implodes. But the nature of the quartz crystal is such that it's not going to implode phase conjugate. It's not going to become negentropic without the pent, which is your body's harmonics, which is what you said, your consciousness, your bliss. So your focus into it, if you know the history of phase conjugate pump waves and gravity making, the Minkowski-Frost crystal, which is another subject, the phase conjugate pump wave is what activates the quartz crystal. And we made a film about that called Warp Propulsion, you and me together, actually. Yeah. But for that quartz crystal, unlike the lithium niobate of the warp crystal of Star Trek Star Wars, which is a phase conjugate, by the way, but the phase conjugate pump wave in this case is you. That's the point.
Yes, yes, yes. And we were even recommended recently by Jen Han to that gamma brain waves are freaking good for doing that.
and we're going to show the charts. And actually, thank you for saying that. That's where the brain waves from Jean-Charles Moyen went beautifully. Actually.
Yes, yes. And everyone, I recommend everyone, yes, everyone to watch Jean-Charles' last movie coming up, where Dan studies and everything is there in detail, so you'll go.
Yeah, it's the climax of the film we made about John Charles' brainwave, and it reached gamma wave, and which meant he made the perfect implosive cascade. So that's where we're going. So just finish these slides. So that's how the Nazi bell flew, because it was gravity matrix. It was a phase conjugate pump wave down the vortex, in that case mercury, iron doped mercury, and the vril was basically the longitudinal. So this is the principle of zero-point energy, vacuum energy, and this is the physics of consciousness itself. It is the physics of ascension, because you can't get the next axes of spin symmetry superposed in the next dimension unless you use golden ratio, which embeds in a longitudinal array distribution. And this is how astral parasites actually get toasted when you have bliss, because at the center point of implosion, only the shareable wave survives. It's literally the physics of pure intention. So if you're intending something shareable, then at the center, the parasites are toasted, because a parasite is an example of a wave that isn't shareable, actually.
I have something to say. Jen Han also, which is Thor Han's brother, for those who don't know him, say that because Dan asked him the question, but can this be like parasited or chaotically influenced? And he replied, no. When the frequency is in a state of pure resonance, non-resonance, incoherence cannot match it. It just doesn't work.
And if electrically we were to understand exactly what that means, we talked about at realheartcoherence.com how you could use the internal phase coherence of the EKG as a lie detector. It's functional. Realheartcoherence.com. I invented the word heart coherence in the literature, actually, because I figured out how to measure phase coherence in EKG, which is basically your heart becomes a laser when you speak your truth. But the interesting thing is that your heart knows which wave is shareable, which means can achieve perfected distribution, which is exactly the same as what determines what memory goes through death, because death is a small electrical black hole. You see the lattice cobweb tunnel spiral, the lattice, the Heinrich Clouvet form constants at the moment of death, well known. There's a map to dying, goldenmean.info/immortality. And the reason you see that symmetry operations in DNA, actually, at the moment of death, well documented, is because implosion is required for successful death, which is successful compression, which then enables your aura to get the centripetal inertia, just the way John Charles did, to propagate coherently into that longitudinal array, which is the collective unconscious, a communion of saints. And the library card that gets you in there is there's something that's shareable. I mean, there's something that serves all. I mean, there's something that serves the survival. The DNA, it's like DNA in a library has been collecting a library of survival information for 1 billion years. And if you want a library card to get into that array called the ancestor memory, you have to have a shareable wave, which means you can't die successfully if you're angry because
yes, you don't succeed, you don't pass through the, you are in dissonance and you don't have the right frequency resonance to pass through the vortex. That's why most of the people who have a normal natural death experience this state of bliss and well-being just minutes before.
And if they've practiced their bliss, and if they were lucid dreamers, ideally also if they were doing this in nature, it's much easier actually.
Yes.
You know, all those pictures we see of the soul leaving the body after death, the good pictures come in nature. In the hospital, there's electrosmog and some issues, you know. But it was our friend Ray Moody, who's wonderful.
Oh, yes.
He showed that death visions are electrically contagious. The surgeons have documented medically that death visions are a shareable wave. I mean, what it means is that the room is full of that vision because the successful death creates that implosive vortex that allows your plasma membrane to enter that larger fractal longitudinal array, the dreaming track songline or something. And to get in there, you have to do compression well, which means you've sorted your affairs, which means every scene in your life has been sorted. So anybody that you were angry at, you suddenly, oh, you saw it from their perspective and my perspective and their perspective and consumed perspective, which is, by the way, the study of the design of Shakespearean theater is called consumed perspective, the cube octa theater, because the sequence of emotions enabled. So at the end of the play, you realize that everyone's actions, you understand all their intentions, and then e pluribus unum at the end of the play. The play is the thing in which you will capture the conscience of.
Yes, I actually noticed that now that you say it. Shakespeare's play are driven in a way that you're taken into a vortex, you hold your breath, and you see your conscious that you're going to, it converges towards a truth at the end, and then suddenly poof, someone brings the truth.
At the beginning of the play, you think that actor's an idiot, and this actor's an idiot, and this actor. But at the end of the play, you realize, oh, I understand each of their intentions. And suddenly you are everyone. That's called consumed perspective.
Yes, that exactly. Wow.
And the fact that the design of that theater is cube octa, you know, and the cube octa, the Shakespearean theater, cube octa, you have cube octa, ecosa, octa, and tetra. So the tetra cube octa is all one symmetry. And the cube octa symmetry of the design of the Shakespearean theater actually matches the sequence of the emotions portrayed on one side of the stage, then the other side of the stage, then the other side. So you're actually consuming perspective. It's like you're inhabiting the eyeballs on a peacock feathers array, which are in such exact phase symmetry, like a rose. You know, how can an ant have a million facets on its eyeball and still see only one thing? That's called consumed perspective. So if the phase lock is correct between them, there's a place in the center called phase conjugate, which is where the pine cones kiss noses. And that implosion is called perception. It's called the phase conjugate origins of perception. And that's why if you create that sequence of implosive harmonics, about 50% of people who get out of therapy.net plasma with that frequency signature report sharpened vision. Or even after you take a pee, you feel your vision sharpens because your body's a better dielectric. It's the same physics.
Yeah, it's kind of a bliss. It's a bit of a bliss after.
Yeah. Well, see, or even, you spit out mucus or whatever your body does, your body's essentially increasing its dielectric constant to make you a better implosive capacitor, because that's what allows the implosion, which is the inhabiting of plasma that makes consciousness possible. It also explains, for example, why at the moment of bliss and the moment of death and the moment of birth, you don't need to breathe. Because the breathing is a phase conjugate pump wave to enable the implosion to happen. But if the implosion is happening at higher frequencies, if you've ever been in intense kundalini, it feels like lightning, there's no need to breathe, because you can inhabit the stillness. You're at the center of that array, actually.
And
So
time,
it's literally,
time dilation, in infinite time dilation in one singularity of time, like
perfect stillness, perfect stillness. And when it's called time dilation, that's the other thing. And we just made a whole film series in the physics of time that actually, the universe is simply made of a superfluid of compressible charge called the ether. And that superfluid, when that compressible charge rotates, it stores inertia. The only definition of mass and matter, the only definition, is the inertia of charge rotating. And the period of that charge rotating is the only definition of time. In other words, time is only a name for spin rate, only. So, of course, if you're accelerating, some of the translation of charge vorticity will accelerate the spin rate. So you experience time speeding up. But actually, it's simply a name for spin rate. So once you understand that, first you can understand the physics of coincidence, because it's just charge coupling. It's why golden ratio optimized coincidence in the Mayan calendar, because it enabled the charge coupling to be optimized between the short spin and the long spin. So if you set up the physics of time, this is all at goldenmean.info/coincidence, and is a perfect part of the curricula for the life designers, what Thoth's homework was, that the reason not just Venus year, Earth year is golden ratio to the harmonic series of the Schumann, which is golden ratio to the brain waveform. The golden ratio there was to enable the embeddability. Physics call that entanglement, enabling action at a distance. We now know the embeddability perfected is what phase conjugation is by golden ratio, which is the physics of coincidence, which enables negentropy, actually. So once we understand that time is only a name for spin rate, then we're not confused by these people that say, well, space-time is bending. It's actually not a helpful language, because actually all it was meant was, as you accelerated, the spin rate increased, and you called that time speeding up. And when you say that's time stopped, what you actually mean was all rotations came to phase lock at one point and were coupled there.
Yes, I've been explained so many times by my upstairs. Time exists only. Linear time exists only when there is gravity. Out of gravity, time is eternal. It's a present moment. It's time. It's not linear. Linearity goes with gravity, and that they are very clear with that. And it's very understandable, because the gravity of a planet around a star, it determines a certain linear time, with the seasons and the year,
actually, someone who knew why objects fall to the ground could actually understand that. Unfortunately, those who don't know why objects fall to the ground will not get that. The reason objects fall to the ground is because the adding and multiplying of phase velocities that phase conjugate fractality allows.
Velocity.
Yeah, the phase velocity, recursive constructive adding and multiplying, is called acceleration of charge, the only definition of gravity, actually. And so experiencing that acceleration of charge towards center, named the gravity, is only enabled by golden ratio phase conjugate fractality, the cause of gravity. So once you know why an object falls to the ground, then you could have the conversation with you, ELENA, where you say time is enabled. Time is affected by gravity. What you're saying is that in the presence of the implosive acceleration towards center, the experience of time is radically different. And that would be true. The experience of spin rate,
of course,
is, whereas if you're in a very large array and you're not being sucked in by any major local fractality, there's no major gravity near you, then there's no distortion in that array. And so it's much more possible to inhabit a much larger array. But if you can maintain your focus in the presence of gravity, then you can incarnate and still remember that you were here to drain the swamp, even when you're up to your ass in alligators.
Yes. Yes, and also something that I've been taught as well is that traveling in space equals traveling in time. How do you develop that?
Well, space-time is a name for an array, effectively, and the array is an array of standing wave nodes. Now, the important point about arrays is a strictly tetracubic array creates only octave harmonics and creates stasis. This is why ice is hex, because it's very good for stasis and very bad for distribution. So nature uses hex for very specific things where stability is required, which is why a witch would use a hex to fix the spell. Whereas if the witch wishes to send a spell, I don't know if you can wiggle your nose, but
No, I can't.
I tell Valerie about
I haven't studied witchcraft enough to.
well,
There.
I think the physics of witchcraft starts with the physics of Eskimo kissing, that the tip of the nose is a cartilage which is microwave conductive. So you get a spark at the nose, and you can measure insect navigating by the same microwave, incidentally, which is why the pyramid walls are microwave guides, the physics of magic. But but how do we were that was a joke. But it's true that then the ability to propagate coherently is depends on being able to propagate plasma through a vortex, which is how the nose functions for the witch. Well, I don't think that was very relevant to the question, but the question we started with was hex versus pent. So in the array in space-time, the arrangement of all the masses in the galaxy, DNA, Earth grid, and zodiac, they're all dodecacosa because that array enables golden ratio, which enables implosive compression at the nodes, which is the physics of sacred space, which is why only at Earth grid, dodecacosa, sacred space, cross node points, dreaming track song lines, is telepathy enabled, and why at those nodes, Bruce Cathy proved nuclear critical mass is radically reduced. We know exactly why, because radiation is the opposite of compression. And it's at those node points, the only place you can successfully put a cozy rift mirror, a labyrinth, or even a therapy, or a cathedral, or the best place for lucid dreaming and bliss and death, are at those nodes, because their distribution is enabled, the still points, where Korotkov measured the Kogi went to make phone calls to their ancestors. He called it fractal air. It's all about the compression at those nodes, which are longitudinal interferometry, which is, the Vril and the arrays. And so this is then an introduction to space and time. Space and time are a name for that array, and time is a name for where spin density is enabled. And so the spin density, the rate of spin as it's affected by where you are in the array, is the effect of time. So that's why when you get to a still point in your aura and you're having an intense bliss experience, they say all time came into the present. What that meant was that at all the nodes in that array, the information became available to you. I give a very specific example. We went with Valerie to her very older friend here who, has some Alzheimer's, was kind of losing it. And we tried to go with compassion. And on the way back, we were struggling with the memory. And we stopped in at a French church, actually. We went to the place in the church where it's about 2/3 of the way up the aisle, where almost every French church, the magnetic lines cross.
Yeah.
And Valerie says she was very refreshed there, as was I. But something else happened to me there, and that was I closed my eyes. We doused it, and I could feel where the magnetic lines were crossed. And then I closed my eyes, and I could literally look down that magnetic line like it was a transparent tube. And I even saw a circular vortex at a distance inside some kind of rock cavern where there was water. and I could see where that magnetic line had been. It was literally a transparent tube, actually. And that's when I began to realize the importance of these arrays, actually, because it's literally an organ of perception for a larger being body. And after you have more bliss, you're more transparent to the array.
Yeah, that reminds me, there's a church near where I live in Ireland. It's in a little village and it's on a special node, and it's called the Dingle Diamond, and it's a crossing of 4 ley lines. We make 8 stars, and the node in the middle is in the center of the church, and underneath there's a cave, and when you stand there, you can see you can feel it activate. If you put your consciousness in a state of, well, bliss. As a shaman, I put myself in a state of trance, and I could feel all the ley line activating and like pulsing, and exactly like white tubes, about 50 centimeter to a meter high. It depends on which one it was. And I could connect with an earth spirit. There was a spirit that I saw as a dragon, a golden dragon, not the dragons with the wings, like the Chinese dragons, and it was coiled underneath the node, and it was absolutely fantastic.
My friend David Yarrow wrote that famous book, Dragon and the Ice Castle, in which he saw the Earth magnetic dragons, and occasionally they would come out. And it's a plasma being of great planetary intelligence. Yes. And actually our friend Jason Matozo, fractalwater.com, was here recently in France, and we were exploring the old stone fences, actually. And he was explaining from the dolmen work in the States that the more of these stone fences, as they were broken, fertility went down radically. And the physics is that the actual circulation of the magnetic lines is the irrigation pipe for magnetic fertility. And there's actually a place, it's called the Visigothic ruins here near Canigou, where the really advanced local geobiologists will take you there. And I've been there, it's above Torinia. But there's a place where there's a certain magnetic vortex and you can feel it powerfully. And at that place, the ancient Druid and Visigothic shaman, depending on what direction you spin that vortex, it literally opens and closes a magnetic valve that controls where the magnetic fertility goes in the valley. It's like controlling where the water goes, but it's even more important, it's controlling where the magnetism goes. And once we understand that every time we build a highway that cuts a major Earth magnetic line, not only do we lose rainmaking, we lose fertility, we lose implosion, we lose negentropy, we lose the Schumann coherence, we lose the negentropy of Gaia. So we have to learn to restore that magnetic grid. It's life or death. That would be Thoth's advice, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, I've been working on the sacred site Tara Hill in Ireland, where it's quite very, very powerful earth grid there. And the motorway, there was a motorway who went through, cut in half the biggest henge in the country, and cut it in half. And one of my best friends really led protest. She's a druidess. She's actually the one who started to train me. She led protests, and it failed because the government's money, But we reactivated it. We reactivated it by a druid ritual.
Well, that's good. So you can, to some extent, repair the magnetic conductivity through, but there's a limit to that. I mean, ultimately, remember James DeMayo, who was wonderful, in the Wilhelm Reich tradition, they documented the fact that the spread of patriarchy causes the formation of deserts. I mean, that's in the literature. Highly technical scientific research proved that you can map the spread of deserts as patriarchy spreads. goldenmean.info/geobiology, goldenmean.info/patriarchy, I think. But anyway, it's the James DeMayo literature. The point was the physics of why the spread of deserts the spread of patriarchy measurably causes the formation of deserts. Somebody needs to know, as half of today's planet dies of drought. somebody ought to figure that out. goldenmean.info/rain. And it's actually quite simple. If you watch a child putting a hole in a cloud, usually if they're a very happy child standing in the mud and well grounded, and they look up and they talk to a cloud, they establish a relation, then they focus there, you'll get a beautiful hole in that cloud. Probably 80% of kids can do that. The physics, well known to the Reichian tradition, the physics is that the centripetal electric field made by human attention creates what's called permission to touch for those water vapor molecules. And that's the difference between water vapor and a droplet. It's literally Christos. It's why Thoth, under the Tutankhamun label, was later named Christ. The Christos principle is the permission to share, permission to touch for waves, which obviously requires fractal symmetry. So the fractal electrical nature of attention made the centripetal force, which enabled the water vapor to become a droplet, literally a cloud seeding. There was a star seeder. So the reason the spread of patriarchy causes deserts is because of loss of permission to touch, actually, for magnetic lines and for people. And when people can't touch, magnetic lines can't touch. And that's what we showed at goldenmean.info/rain, where after war broke out in Vukovar and Yugoslavia and Israel and Ireland, actually, Professor Phil Callahan, my teacher, measured this, that you could measure the disappearance of the underground water. And the reason that water disappears underground after war is because there's no permission to touch for magnetic lines. And if you go back in there and you put labyrinths and stone circles, as Marty Kane, a famous labyrinth maker friend from USA, martykane.com, did, you can actually measure the return of the underground water. So that's actually permission to touch, which is centripetal and attracts the water to touch, actually. That's desertification and patriarchy.
Because water has the same frequency as love. And when
yeah, exactly, which is the next.
Well, war is the contrary of love. It's dissonance.
It's failure to touch, actually, which is, and the famous example of that, which is about love, is that if you touch your lover's skin, and the skin turns pink under your touch, it means her blood wants to touch you. But if her skin doesn't turn pink under your touch, it means her blood doesn't want to touch you. That's the difference between vasodilation and vasoconstriction, which, by the way, is how we measure the difference between fear and anger in the lab in psychophysiology with Albert Axe at University of Detroit. We first measure the difference between emotion in purely electrical terms. It's literally constriction versus dilation.
Yes, that makes sense. I have a question before I forget. We were talking about gravity, and what do you make of the ether, the pressure of the ether as, for instance, let's take the Earth, goes through a tremendous speed with all the star system into this vortex in the arms of the galaxy. It's submit to tremendous pressure, from the ether that it just. There are some theories that say that gravity is due to the pressure of ether on the planet. So how do you stand? What are your thoughts about all that? Please.
I think that's a very useful question, actually. At first, I think pure principles. The ether is a name for the universal substrate, which is a superfluid, which is compressible charge. So the compressibility of charge, plus and minus charge, and the distribution, which is a superfluid, is called the ether. So that's the first thing we need to know, because there is only one substance. It is compressible charge, and you can call it ether if you like, but it's definitely a superfluid. It behaves like a superfluid. And Nassim agrees with us on this, and it's pretty well agreed to. So the ether is the compressibility of that universal substrate, superfluid. However, now when you say, the position of the solar system with respect to a galactic symmetry is very useful or interesting or useful example, because, the galactic superwave theory, very parallel to the photon cloud theory, originally said, you know, the solar system obviously is traveling as a helix. In fact, if the
It's a
map of,
helix that was looking for the
yeah,
name. Yeah.
yeah. In fact, goldenmean.info/seed and egg, because it's literally a seed and the egg for the galactic core. And the symmetry of the solar system seen from a distance in a helix looks like DNA
Yes.
seeding the galactic egg.
Yes.
The galactic egg is being seeded.
Totally.
And so that means we could be the vaccine for the Orion Wars. We like to think. But well, if we learn how to make a soul and not get sucked into AI, we could be a vaccine for some wars. You see, that's the point.
Yeah.
But anyway,
seriously.
So our friend Paul Laviolette wrote a galactic superwave about the fact that this interstellar wave was actually the compression, as you say, of an interstellar dust cloud, which had a compression effect on the solar system, which fits perfectly your question. And this is sometimes related to this photon cloud story. But the physics of what's called the rapture in Christianity related to this story clearly has to do with the superposing of a long wave node on a shorter one. Very practical example. I was there in Poland when we were doing Agnihotra inside this with the plasma, and just seconds before the stopwatch showed, the computer showed, this was the instant of sunset, lit the plasma cloud, and my hair stood up like this. I mean, my hair just stood right up. And I knew exactly why, because the perpendicularity of sunset created phase conjugation. It's called four-wave mix. In indigenous, it's called the sacred four directions.
Yes.
And so that alignment then perfectly superposed a longer wave node compression on a shorter wave, enabling that embeddability of the short rotation on the longer rotation. Therify works better at sunrise. Bliss works better. Cathedrals work better. Everything works better at sunrise. Well, now if you take that principle of four-wave mixing to solar equator versus galactic equator. So yes, the solar system is about to pass through the galactic equator, and it is a long wave of compression.
It's perpendicular to the galactic plane.
That's right, yes. Yeah. And it's those perpendicularities nesting one upon the other that enable us to inhabit a much longer wave. We could become a galactic being if we understood a little of science, right? Inhabit the longer wave. So, and you see, if you want to make lasers phase conjugate, first place time reversal and negentropy was ever measured, you got to get that perpendicularity accurate within angstroms. And that's called four-wave mixing. And it's exactly what the ancients talked about the sacred four directions. And so it enables that embeddability. And it's literally a longer wave of pressure. That's exactly what it is.
As I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think our solar system, you have the galactic plane. It's not going like this around. It's going like this, right. And it's crossing it like.
And Drunvalo had an interesting hypothesis that when we were going away from, we had matriarchy, we're going toward, we have patriarchy. It's interesting. You could study, and it is a compression wave itself, and there could be some truth to that, I suppose.
But that's interesting, and it joins. It makes me think about the first graphics you shown with the waves. The Caduceus waves.
Caduceus. Yes.
And that
creating a still point at the center. And when we cross a longer equator, like a galactic equator or the photon cloud or the galactic superwave, lots of names for these, we have the possibility of embedding in a much longer wave if our consciousness is ready for it. And I've said many times that this is an introduction to the physics of the Christian concept of the rapture. The Christian conscience says, you do not want to be left behind at the time of the rapture. And what they mean is, if you can't embed in the stillness, and they say the guns will melt and the ancestors will rise. And actually, they're right. Because during massive compression effect, everything of the wrong dielectric is going to experience heat. The guns will melt. Another reason probably why you don't want to live in a steel and aluminum building, actually. And the other thing is the ancestors will rise during that compression event. The ghosts are re-enabled to distribution.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Ancestor memory, the collective unconscious, dream effects, song lines. It's all about this longitudinal array, which I think is so useful to really delve into the science and, teach our kids and become a shareable wave.
Yes. Yes. Something I want to go back on negentropy. Well, the that's something that's used in the med beds practically. Holographic repairing, and by repairing, it's repairing, pairing again by resonance. So I've been explained that the way certain med beds function is that you have, using crystal technology, you have a body whose holographic structure, because the universe, everything created has a holographic structure, is damaged, is dissonant. There's a wound, there's something dissonant. So they're going to imprint, to reverse the body to find the right moment where the body was totally healthy and well, and re-imprint the resonant, healthy holographic on the damaged one, the dissonant one. And so what Jen told me is that the dissonant hologram will morph into the resonant one, because automatically, because the universe tends towards perfection. I love
Or
that.
negentropy.
Negentropy. So I want to mention that.
Well, yes, and I think we need to be clear. Scientists on this planet will say the concept of medbed is a woo-woo myth. On the other hand, Therify.net, negentropic plasma, is commercially successful in 25 countries, and it does exactly that to create the electric field that restores the tendency towards self-organization. Precisely. Now, obviously, it's not the perfection of, but it certainly goes a long way. But I think also it's clear if we look at the descriptions of those extraterrestrials who have described medbeds. So we have a circulating liquid of stem cells, actually. And if we understand what a stem cell is, how you make a stem cell is you actually create a phase conjugate moment. You actually return a cell. It's called toward de-differentiation, which means if a cell gets back to its original bliss state, the octa of the original stem at the stem of the spine, it's perfectly de-differentiated. That means it's not specialized. But that means it has all the information of negentropy to be any cell at that point. And if you get a cell, almost any cell out of the body, it's called mesenchymal stem cell, get back, if it gets happy enough, literally simply happy enough, it returns to its de-differentiated state. Well, what is a cell that's happy enough? Well, you could call it is literally bliss, but it means all the conditions for life are perfect, including charge distribution efficiency and nutrition and temperature and all. So they literally take cells out of the body and they make a cooking pot where they create the perfect conditions and the cells de-differentiate. And that it was called backwards in time. The cell went backwards in time, but this is the little subtlety here, that in physics, when they first measured negentropy in phase conjugate optics, they realized you could time reverse toward order, but you could time reverse rusted steel to be unrusted, but you could never time reverse toward disorder. Not possible. Which means that it's actually negentropy.
I'm going to give a gift now here, because it's going to be in my next book, but I think I'm going to, it's very relevant that I say it now here. I've been shown how the nine really look like, and I was very shocked, like impressed, surprised. It looked like each one of them looked like protozoa, original cell. but made
Yeah.
of with light and translucent. Look like that. And when you said stem cells,
Yes. Yes. That's beautiful. Hey,
no.
you know, not to draw what I think is probably a beautiful parallel. My teacher on the biophysics of Kundalini, goldenmean.info/Kundalini, Ben Bentoff, in his book Cosmic Comic Book. The sequel was called the Cosmic Book, in which he described what he saw during his intense Kundalini bliss. And he went back to basically, he saw through the eyes of the earth and the eyes of the sun, and then he saw the galactic intelligence, and then he saw a giant living cell, actually, which was the shape of the galactic mind. And there's pictures in the Cosmic Comic Book of the ultimate Kundalini vision, which is exactly what you're describing from Ben Bentoff, my teacher, Itzhak Bentoff. And he even shows they call it the zygote and the centriole at the top and the bottom of a replicating DNA helix was literally a black hole. And so the black hole were functioning as centrioles in the metabolism of one huge living cell, to the point that he would then zoom in on the subcellular components of the centriole in this giant intergalactic cell. And he saw the shapes of the black holes of the centriole of the giant. And the centriole choreographs, by the way, meiosis and mitosis, the perfect dance. And you zoom in and see these black, and he saw the shape of the ancient sacred letter forms, literally. The name and the shape and the service are one. And if you look at the spectrograms of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, Ankh, and Omega, the beginning and the end point are literally waveguides for the perfect beginning and end point of. I mean, it was the ultimate Kundalini bliss vision, and it was a living cell anyway.
Oh my God, yeah, I can confirm that. And when you said stem cell, it just clicked for me, because a stem cell is with a stem cell, you can create anything. A stem cell has the vortex, the compression node that can allow any sort of equation that will organize into different life forms to come through.
Perfect dedifferentiation. And you see, then the perfect medbed was actually the perfect media within which cells can be stem cells. That's what that liquid is. And you can actually breathe that liquid. That's actually the medbed. And the electric field you create, phase conjugate broad spectral, is a superset of what Therify.net is, which is probably as close to a medbed on this planet as there is.
Yeah, it activates the stem cells in what they want them to be. They send real frequency special keys, that will activate a certain organization within the stem cell. That stem cell will become something
to dedifferentiate. Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, the theory would be that these healing devices would function best at these sacred node points, actually, because that where the long wave is available for that embedding, actually. So again, the map of the magnetic lines, the sacred sites, the dodecikosa grid is critical, and the ancients used them for rejuvenation.
Totally. Yes.
Which is where the pyramids are located, by definition, which is the global wireless power distribution grid, which is actually where cells work because DNA radio is enabled.
Yeah, actually, in the Great Pyramid of Cheops, it's a rejuvenation French accent, like medbed kind of. It's a medbed. It's a medbed. Now you can't approach it. It's really guarded. You can't go inside. But everyone who has tried it was rejuvenated, and it's a medbed.
Well, I have to say, about 40 years ago, when I climbed into the sarcophagus in the king's chamber and the lights went out.
You did it.
Yeah, I did.
Oh yeah, and the lights went out. Yes, you said that once. Yes.
Yeah. And, I began to have intense Kundalini, and I was inhabiting the nodes. I was very fortunate to be able to visit the sacred sites, Findhorn in Peru. So that was initiatory for sure.
Yes. Yes, I had the opportunity in Dashur at the Red Pyramid to go inside and in Egypt and sing, chant, and I could see the sound really activating a machine. Something was happening, and my body suddenly felt buzzing so strong. It was like my body was not flesh and bones anymore, but pure electricity. It was Very
You could
impressive.
propagate into the array. And when you make sound in a place like that,
Yeah.
you close your eyes, you see flashes, which are plasma, like orbs, you know. But actually, back to then Thoth Hermes designing
Yes.
the king's chamber for, you know, it's literally a squirt gun for the soul into a longitudinal array. And even at that point, they said that Osiris Enki, which was literally the son of Thoth, Thothmosis, which means sons of Thoth, the king's line, if he didn't inhabit the sun, the Nile wouldn't flood the next year.
Yes.
And what he meant by that was actually
Water.
an electrical truth that, you know, that every indigenous tribe in the US, I knew personally, the Iroquois and the Hopi, they knew that if they didn't do their rituals, they wouldn't regulate the timing of the seasons, actually. And they were literally inhabiting the long wave, just like the Aboriginals. You know, you thought they were sleeping, but their eyes are closed and they're manipulating the song lines in the longitudinal coherence of their lucid dreaming bodies, actually. And so our relationship to this larger array, it's critical that we discover that soon, because our climate is going into chaos unless we do, and that's called biofeedback.
Yes, yes, yes.
Is that the happily ever after? Well, happily ever after is now we can teach our kids, hopefully. And by the way, we're relaunching fractalu.com. We've got new teachers, and so that we have and we need to invite you, please, be one of the teachers.
Teachers, me.
Well, no, the galactic context story here. We
Yes,
need you,
okay.
ELENA, for that. It's
Okay.
fractalu.
Yes, yes, I suppose. Thank you. It will be my honor and pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to choreograph. So you're going to be our galactic teacher here for the history, because you've been there. You saw their faces, and you had the tour.
Yes, I can teach what I've learned, seen, and experienced, you know, and if it can help, you know.
It's a good thing, yes. So, I mean, maybe unless you have more questions, but just to
No,
say,
it's fine. I'm fine now.
yep, have we done our story to the Mori for today's story? The Cedar races, in my view, the Thoth, the Hermes, Caduceus. Remember, Thoth Hermes is the name for the bloodline that became Magdalene in the Jesus myth. Thoth Hermes, the name for the bloodline of the royal kings of Egypt, Thothmosis. Thoth Hermes is the name for Quetzalcoatl Viracocha, if you believe Maurice Cotterell. So, and this guy was interviewing the lucid dreamers of every indigenous tribe. Thoth is the name for the founder of Atlantis. Thoth Hermes is the name for the guy that built the pyramid array. So, and Thoth now is the name for the speaker for the Cedars.
Yes.
So what is the scientific agenda to know the conditions that make life? And life happens when charge gets implosive. It's enabled to be centripetal through that center point, which is as simple as touching your foot to ground. Which go ahead. Really, that's
sorry.
that was the story to the Mori. Yeah, to be a Cedar race, you would need to understand that. And that's the same for interstellar mechanics as it is for how to design a planet whose Schumann harmonics implode and become negentropic. You know, Lovelock proved that Gaia was self-organizing. That's been proven. Now, for the first time, we can say why. The temperature, the pressure, the moisture became apparently self-regulating. How and why is anything negentropic? Ask your science teacher, because they need to know.
Yes. And those who are creating all this dissonance in the climate, and those who have regressively turned down our DNA abilities, altered human DNA throughout different procedures to just bind us as a slave race. Well, they are terrified that Thoth is back with the original template of the resonant, powerful, pure, clean human DNA.
That's right.
And his name is Ea, water, because he was a geneticist, and water is the compression node, the superfluid.
That's right. Ea, water. Yes.
Yes.
For whom Earth was named, Ea, Earth.
Yes. Ea, Eau, water in French.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Right. And actually, what sets you free in that array. The only real definition of freedom in that array is to understand how distribution in the array is enabled, whether you call Heya, then heaven, where the breath of charge takes flight, or plains of Sharon, or Champs-Elysees. The ability to inhabit that larger array, which is where you go when you lucid dream or die or have bliss or have Kundalini, it's the same. Inhabiting that array depends on understanding its dynamics. And the science of that is precisely what the cedar races and life force teach.
Yes. Exactly.
So that was the happily ever after, I hope.
Yes. Here we go. Now we arrived to the point to really demonstrate the truth.
Yes, we could actually design local dynamics and celestial dynamics to actually enable life force creation. So from architecture, we have bioarchitects.net. You can design buildings whose electric field causes a seed to grow and causes children to have bliss. And then you can design a community and finally a planet and even a galaxy. Why do the galaxies have golden ratio spiral arms? Why is the Earth grid dodecaecosa? Why is the Earth grid harmonic Schumann all golden ratio to Planck almost perfectly? There was a designer.
Yes.
And we can join that once we understand.
Exactly. Well, Dan, I feel very grateful for your knowledge to come and confirm exopolitic events. And you are always enlightening us with joining the dots, joining the notes.
Well, we're having fun. I'm looking forward to your next book. Really looking forward.
Oh, you're going to have a fit with it. You're going to have, oh my God, we're going to 20 videos.
It's fun to cedars.
And I'm actually having rest because once this book is out, I mean, that's going to be the thing everybody is going to talk about, in good, in bad as well. I know, but we're going to have so much fun.
That's it. Yeah. And this was an introduction to the science. And ELENA has the history story. You put that together and it's perfect.
Wait for it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dan. And I'm putting all the links to all the websites, everything about what we've spoken today, and enjoy the journey.
It's been a blessing. Thank you, ELENA. And love you all. Loved everybody.